And how would you describe your political background? I understand from reading that you were a Bernie supporter.
Yeah, I mean, I think three terrible candidates, and I thought Bernie was absolutely the least bad of the three. But none of those people were fit for the White House. I mean, Donald Trump is by far too erratic and too destructive to the fabric of the country. Hillary is absolutely too engaged in some sort of machine that is being cynically operated for the few at the expense of the many. And Bernie's ideas about economic reform didn't make any sense. I simply thought that he was the most decent of the three and that we could easily survive 4 years of a Sanders presidency that might be kind of confused on economic issues, but with a big heart and with somebody who was bold enough to claim socialism as his mantle inside of the United States, which is insane. So that, he was individualistic enough. And my feeling was that was the softest landing, and that the Hillary option and the Trump option were, nearly catastrophic for this political process.
And you talked about kind of a sense of a kind of hollowing out of politics. And I think you've spoken before about the sense that these systems get weaker and weaker as they continue. It seems that as time has gone on, the choices that we're being given in the political system get weaker and weaker.
Well, because you're systematically driving out the people who should be trying to lead. You're making it so unpleasant to hold real opinions, to have real integrity. You're driving the costs of the specific group of people we need, so that instead the only people who are going to show up are the people that we should fear most.
And why does that happen?
Because the sort of people we need are likely to be independent thinkers, and institutions are terrified of independent thinkers. An independent thinker can reverse course, change their mind, take a totally different direction. For better or for worse, Donald Trump has a lot of independent thinker in him. You may not like his independent thoughts, but you're not going to easily cage him in a perspective. He's going to break out of every cognitive prison that you put in front of him. Okay, imagine that you had somebody who had a great deal more wisdom and a lot more foresight than Donald Trump, but who wanted to be very nimble, who did not want complete transparency when trying to negotiate a trade treaty, who was acting in the better interests of most of the citizens of his country, but needed some privacy for his family, for his own failings, or potentially, for her weaknesses. Maybe because this was her first time, on a national stage, even if that person was the right person for the job. In such circumstances, you need to have something that is more decent to the kind of people that we need for leadership. And what you have is a world which has been throwing up candidates that are broadly acceptable to the institutions. We need candidates who are broadly unacceptable to institutions. It's most important. Like, any candidate that is broadly acceptable to the institutions, to me, is dead on arrival. I don't mean that everyone who is not acceptable to the institutions is somebody I would like to vote for, but the subset of people that I'm interested in should be broadly unacceptable to the major institutions across the board, both left and right.
Something a bit like the Groucho Marx quote, that wouldn't want to be part of a club that would have me as a member.
Well, the institutions don't want to reform. And so it's rational to me. I don't think it's quite that. I think that the idea is that there's two games here. There's trying to get the best deck chairs on the Titanic, and there's trying to rescue the ship. And in general, nobody can think of how to rescue the ship, which is a daunting task. So instead, what we're doing is we're fighting for position in a losing game. And it's important that that stop.
So you're talking about a different way of thinking, people who have a different way of thinking. Is that what characterizes the members of the IDW?
It's hard to say. I mean, I would say that everybody in the IDW is fairly disagreeable in the sense of Big Five personality inventory. So can you hold a position when you're the only person in a room that believes that thing? Like if it's you versus 100 people. I would say almost everybody in the core of the IDW is capable of holding a position where everyone is against you. And I think that that trait is extremely rare.
Something that's been talked about before is that, in a way, the people in the IDW have been selected for. Like, a lot of them have had quite high-profile encounters. You look at Sam Harris with Ben Affleck, or you look at Brett Weinstein, and there's a sense that they've in some way had to live out their ideas. There's a sense of bravery that they've had to stick up for themselves. Jordan Peterson and C16, I mean, you can list a lot of times where, as you said, they had to be that one person who was thinking a certain thing.
No, I mean, I think I made the point, probably on the Rubin Report, that what's going on is that when you ask any large collection of people to salute a nonsensical flag and pledge allegiance to it, and more or less everyone makes the calculation, I guess if this is going to get me through my day, I'll salute any flag. Then you've got the one gal or one guy who doesn't want to. Well, my observation is that that person is usually sitting on an entire mountain of interesting thoughts that they don't have the freedom to simply make a convenience readjustment. And so from that perspective, yeah, in general, if you ask 1,000 people to salute a flag that makes no sense and tell them that they'll be incentivized, you'll get a $1,000 check at the end, or you won't lose your job, and somebody stands up and says, no way, I'm getting out of here, do what you want. That person is usually much more interesting than just being a contrarian. That person is usually saying no because they've got an entire worldview that is built by hand and bespoke. And so that's why this method of finding people has been relatively fruitful. It's people who don't back down, usually don't back down for a reason, because there's every reason just to go along.